Hi, welcome to the Jalp Call podcast. I'm your host for the day, Brian Gallagher, and I will be interviewing Gary Ross. Gary studied at University of St Andrews in Scotland, coming away with a first-class honours degree in mathematics and statistics. He was a director of web integration at KIDI Parsons School of Design from 1995 to 2009, which was 14 years. And Gary's an associate professor in the Faculty of Pharmaceutical Sciences at Kanazawa University, where he is Director of English and develops the online ESL programme. A full stack developer specialising in AI and online learning, creator of JTalk and the superb conference platform Edzilla. He was also the webmaster for Jalp Call for several years. His research focus is on usability, use of computer speech, and the integration of mobile into the classroom. Gary, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Brian.
Yeah. Hey Gary, so how is life in Kanazawa?
Wet is the defining characteristic, but yeah, getting nice towards autumn.
So
So
Faculty of Pharmaceutical Sciences, and you're
yeah,
Director of English. What
yeah.
what do you actually teach at the university?
So basically, all my students are pharmacy students or
Mm,
pharmaceutical science students. Depends on after 2 years, there's a kind of split. Some of them go into pharmaceutical science, some of them go into pharmacy.
hmm.
And my focus is preparing them for the future of English in their respective fields. So the pharmaceutical scientists will be more dealing with reading papers. The pharmacy they tend to get the pharmacy students will get a pharmacy license,
Mm, mm-hmm.
which enables them to practice. And we don't. I think most people don't really know what pharmacists do, other than it's that person who hands out medicine at the at the local store. But of course, they do a lot more than that. They're actually in charge of the whole um, category of determining what medicine is taken,
Right, right,
so
right, right, right.
so if you're talking about the pharmacist that you meet at the store, of course, that kind of talking to patients or so on and so forth is becoming important. But one of the things that's really changing in pharmacy is something I say to my students is, if you want to talk to a health professional, if you want to talk to a doctor, you have to make an appointment.
Mm.
Same with, I mean, you have to be in hospital to talk to a nurse. But how the pharmacist is the easiest person to talk to. You just walk down to Genki or whatever
Direct
and just
contact.
say,
Yeah.
there's a professional pharmacist with a license right then. You can just talk to them. Um,
Mm.
and, with the aging society and stuff and more immigration, what is happening in at the moment is more and more responsibilities are put on to the pharmacist, especially for screening like minor ailments, because doctors in 20 years' time, when with the aging population, just simply won't have time, or we won't have resources. So that kind of um, dealing with patients on a one-to-one level, history taking, that kind of thing.
A
So,
lot
but
of a
obviously in
lot of
English,
communication.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
communication.
so I
So,
teach some pharmacy students at Gakuin University,
right,
and I
right.
find that they respond to instruction fantastically well. They seem very receptive and they seem very
Yeah.
smart. And I suddenly think, oh, I'm the best teacher ever. They follow every instruction I can get them to do. Like it's great to have students that are easy to teach if they're very
Yeah, and
top
I
level.
I feel that pharmacy is one of those sciences where there's a definite need for human interaction. So in other words, you can't just go and, like pharmaceutical scientists, you can't go on your own in a lab as such. this kind of human interaction is a fundamental thing for pharmaceuticals, pharmacy students, or whether they go into pharmaceutical science or pharmacy, it's all tied together with the ability to communicate with people, to understand stuff on a like a local level or even a national level to try to develop new strategies of health, because we know health is changing, autonomy is
Mm.
changing,
And
the type of health that people are getting is changing. Yeah.
how many years have you been at Kanazawa University now?
I guess it's 11 now.
11 years.
Yeah, it's just more than 10.
Okay.
Yeah, my mathematics degree comes in handy sometimes.
Yeah, simple arithmetic. Right. So, like as probably most of our listeners know, but maybe a few don't. So, of course, you're the founder of Edzilla, which is our conference hosting system, and you have more websites. Can you list your proudest work? Like,
Yeah, I think so. It's a funny thing actually, and of course I'm actually updating it at the moment, but about and I think I'll talk about this later. It's like the best way to get good at something tech is just to try to build something.
mm,
And in about 2005 or 4, and this is like in the early day, fairly early days of the web. It was when it was like Web 2.0, and
mm,
there was no mobile or anything. And I could never read my emails that I would get in Japanese. I couldn't read any Japanese that was sent to me.
mhm,
And so I made, just for myself, I made this website called JTalk. Now it looks a little bit of,
jtalk.com.
I feel it looks a little bit of a mess at the moment, but I'm definitely working on updating it when maybe I'll talk about that later. But the strange thing was that I just made this for myself. I just put it on the web because I could do web programming, and it was just a case of you just paste in some text and it would turn. We all know, if we're living in Japan, the problem of turning kanji into romaji or into hiragana, and being able to read Japanese is a real challenge. And I just stuck that up in about 2005, and I think it has 30 or 40,000 users a day nowadays.
So that's
So
that's
that is
J hyphen talk
talk,
dot com,
yeah,
right?
dot
Okay.
com.
So yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, I've actually been working on updating it for a couple of years now, and I
Mm.
keep on getting busy with other things and not completing it. But um, I am definitely going to be updating in the next couple of weeks. He says, because
Right.
that's one
Okay.
of the things he's,
You've been saying
yeah,
you've been saying it the
yeah,
same for
yeah,
years.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So and one of the things that is changing with programming is the speed with which you can work, especially with
Mm,
AI. Yeah,
mhm,
and AI integration, these kind of things make it. But I think that's the funny thing is it was never designed as anything more than this is handy for me.
mm.
And I think it's had like, I don't know, it's nearly 1 billion views now over the years.
Yowza.
That's like, yeah, it's like one of those things that's just kind of sat there over the years. And yeah, it basically pays for my server, basically, but not much
Excellent.
more than
Yeah.
that. So
Steady
this
money
doesn't,
coming in.
I
Yeah.
can retire. So yeah, that would be. And the other thing that I guess is the work that I'm doing now with Mark
Mark Brierley.
Brierly,
Brierley, right?
yeah, which is edI.app, it's actually beta edI.app, which is our AI driven um, extensive reading app, which we're in the middle of making. That's always the problem when you build websites. You're always in the middle of making things. So you
Mm-hmm.
end up, I think I end up spreading myself a little bit too thin as I get I get excited by
Yeah,
new things.
spinning
Yeah.
plates. Fine
Yeah,
place.
yeah,
So right, yeah. So
yeah,
you've we'll put these we'll put the links into the show notes at the end so people can just click on them and add another one to the billion.
yeah,
Yeah, done so much. So you and I presented, if you remember back in 2019. Well, I guess we were on the same billing. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
so there was 2019 was in Nagoya, and
Right.
that was with the very lovely Suako Uehara, and I was
Yeah.
doing my uh, technology implementation matrix, uh,
Right, right.
which went down a storm. But then it, like most things that go down a storm, I think it very suddenly hit the bottom of the ocean. After that, I have to revive that because I think it's yeah,
Well,
it's
everything's changed, obviously, with
everything has changed. Everything changed.
with AI. So, I mean,
So that was
that's
at the forum. That was the Jalk Call forum. So of course we're going to have a Jalk Call forum coming up at Jalk International in Tokyo in November.
right,
Um, and so at that time you were talking about like how to run a conference online.
right,
And
right,
so
right,
it was very timely, and I think that you could see it was coming, and many people had talked about it and just asking if it was possible, and then you explained to people this is how you do it. And so it was just like, wow, right, it can be done. So, and then of course, like soon after 2019, well, there was the severe acute respiratory syndrome covariant 19, for us
Who could
to give
forget it?
his full name. I was about in China in 2003 when we had severe acute respiratory syndrome 1. Uh,
Right,
that
yes,
was
yes.
SARS
Was that
back
SARS? Yes,
in
yeah,
Beijing. Yeah,
yeah,
so of
yeah,
course
yeah,
COVID is a SARS
yeah,
COVID-19.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, it was very kind of yeah. You must have had a magic ball knowing that it was coming and it
yeah.
was gonna kind of save the world in it. So quite a lot of your work is basically with translation tools and then building platforms to try
Or
and
autonomy. Yeah, and of course, one of my interest now is to do with autonomy of learning.
right,
So,
okay. And just
yeah,
on that note,
right.
we're gonna stop there, part one. Join us after the break, where Gary's gonna hopefully get into his research a bit more. Okay, see you after the break. Hi,
Okay.
okay, welcome back, everybody. Part two. I'm your host, Brian Gallagher, and I'm joined today by Gary Ross from Kanazawa University. Gary, in the first section there, we were talking about Edzilla and some of the platforms, J Talk.
Yeah.
I want to try and go on a little bit about kind of like research. So your collection of journal articles and presentations from 2016 to 2023 explores integration of AI, ChatGPT, and speech recognition in English language learning. And what I could see were the key themes included doctor-patient simulations, which you mentioned in the
Right.
first part, ESP
Yeah.
training, online speech tools and task-based learning. So it
Right.
highlights kind of technological advances in learning management systems and digital games and classroom applications. So the work reflects growing interest in enhancing communication skills through interactive AI-driven platforms and the evolving role of technology in language education. So uh, advanced text-to-speech technology seems to be something that comes up quite a lot there. Integration of new speech synthesis markup language, so the SSML tags. So,
Yeah.
can you tell us a bit about your work with text to speech technology?
Yeah. This actually this started maybe 10 years ago.
Mm.
Um, and I was really just using things built into the browser,
Mhm.
like inside the browser, you can detect speech and turn it into written text. Um, Basically, it's for deaf and blind users. So blind users can actually get the browser to read to them, and deaf users can obviously use need some of the similar needs. And I decided to use this kind of technology so that the students could practice fairly fairly structured conversations. You know, you um, and what this was really quite effective, but of course, it was really limiting. And I actually remember going to a presentation about 7 or 8 years ago by two Japanese presenters, and they were saying that they were trying to overcome this by like making a kind of tree diagram of conversations, like
Mm,
if the user says this,
mm-hmm.
and they said at the end of the presentation, this is just simply not possible because two times two times two is like suddenly you're getting into like millions of variations.
Mm,
And essentially, in a sense, I felt the technology kind of come to a dead end because you couldn't actually meaningfully speak. It was great for drills,
yeah,
you could do lots of imaginative stuff with that. If you had $10,000, what would you buy? That kind of thing.
right.
And so students could practice that, then the computer would respond in particular patterns. And actually, I went to Pan Sig a few years ago, and I was speaking to Jeanette Dennison,
Mhm.
who also works in with medical students,
Yep.
and we decided to start collaborating. And I remember she said to me in 2019, it would have been just after she submitted her Kaken, I believe.
Mhm.
She said, "Can't we just kind of make a system where it just talks?" And I remember saying, "No, you can't,"
And then you'd say,
because
sure, sure, no problem, no
because
problem.
for
Here's one in
that
my
you need
pocket.
for that you need a human brain. Um, and I said, I think this technology is decades away. And I remember specifically when the first time I used ChatGPT was literally the day it came out.
Mm,
Um, and I started using it, and I was like, sent her a message saying, forget everything you've ever done before. Everything's changed because this thing is phenomenal.
stop the bus,
And
stop the
yeah,
bus. Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
I mean, if you remember back in the day, it would have been November the 30th, 2022, I think, something like that. I remember it was the end of November anyway, when everything changed, when ChatGPT came out. But if you remember, in those days, you could only type. You typed and it would. So I made like I mixed the technologies, the stuff that I was doing already,
Right, right,
so
right.
that our students could actually talk to Chat GPT, and it
Mm,
would talk back. And
mm-hmm.
I programmed some kind of Chrome extension that would do that. The big problem was um, ChatGPT kept on changing the way it was working. So every
Mm,
time it changed, I had to update it, and I was spending far too much time. And this is actually one of the things I quite often say. Often the technology will solve the problem anyway. So
mm,
I was like, okay, I'm not going to bother programming this anymore. I'm just going to um, we're going to use the built-in speaking system.
right,
But
right,
that
right.
said, um, you still need a way to capture speech, and you still need a way to prompt, and you still need ways for all students to be able to use the same. So a lot of the research we've been doing is to do with getting students to be able to use through prompts they can copy and paste basically into the system.
Right,
And
right.
some students have phones, some students don't have phones, some students have now, of course, in Japan, everyone has a phone, but if
Mm,
you're trying to think of this in terms of like making education accessible, we don't want and also some students have a paid version and other students don't. So you have to always consider making a system that all students have equal access to, and otherwise you get this like
Yeah.
so anyway, so that has been part of the challenge is trying to integrate um, what ChatGPT offers into something that you can actually use in the classroom. Um,
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's great. It's great.
I
The voice activation stuff is great, and I think like I would think that falls to the category of assistive technology.
yes, yeah,
So I think a few years ago, probably about 10 years ago now, I went to University of Guam and they have a special center called the Cedars Center there, which
right,
provides technology for the local community, like for the Chamorro people, the native people of
right,
the Mariana Islands of Guam. And
right,
they had great stuff, like they had, like the old ceramide phone that you could put onto a connector and then, like the
right,
sound
right.
would go through and they could type and there was, like it's a very low tech stuff, like, but now,
Yeah, yeah,
it's,
yeah.
it's very high tech. But going back to what you said about, like in 2019, you were talking about, like how difficult. So I'm just going to read a wee quote that I had picked out. So in 2019, you said, a significant aspect of speech recognition is its ability to transcribe spoken words to machine readable text. Even a
Right,
single activity can generate thousands of student utterances using such techniques as corpora and tokenization.
right,
Computer analysis of these sentences may be able common errors to be pinpointed and overuse of particular vocabulary, etc. So yeah, thousands of utterances. How do
yeah. I
you
think it was
think
170,000 I had, something like that. Yeah, yeah,
170,000?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, something like that.
So the additions since then. So yeah, of course, like voice to text.
Right.
What other additions do you think have been since then? So it was text to text. It was voice to text. Have we kind of we've reached it? Next, it's going to be like I'm just thinking it, and the AI is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, of course. Well, I think the big change that will come is that um, so anything that can be measured by a machine is something that can be programmed into AI.
Mm,
So, for example, when you look at someone's face, um, you can look at their facial expression and kind of give some kind of idea if they're angry, happy, sad, or so on and so
yep.
forth. Now, if you but
Visual
there are,
cues, right?
yeah, yeah. So there are lots of patterns that do exist, but most people can't see them. I hear that there are that law enforcement agencies employ people who are hyper have this hyper awareness of people's um, people's facial expression.
Yeah,
Not something you could use in
ethnicities.
court, but they can definitely look at people and say this person is nervous or this person. Now, if you think of AI being able to do this, and this can be a little bit disturbing if you can think about it, because
Mm,
you will be able to AI will be able to mod a bit in the same way as the iPhone or the Android phone can unlock it because it knows it's you by pinpointing the shape of your face. Once facial expressions are trained on millions and millions and millions of facial expressions are trained on AI, it will be able to kind of ascertain your mood or whether you're telling the truth. Of course, there's a disturbing side to this, but I think that's where it's moving. And I think one of the things, I mean, people of our age, we kind of forget. We grew up when there was well, I mean, when I was at university, I didn't even have a computer. So that we grew up in a time of no internet. But if you watch kids who've grown up with iPhones, they go to an old style screen. and they're just touching the screen going, this doesn't work because I expect it to be.
Mm.
Well, you can imagine the children of today who are using their iPhone or and they're speaking to a bot. They are going, that is going to be their way of communicating with the machine, with their so this opens up, well, obviously it's going to be a double-sided coin as everything is. It opens up great possibilities for learners on the one hand, but of course it opens up big worries on the other hand, whether kids,
Mm.
whatever.
Yeah, so it's the old question, you like, are you an optimist or a pessimist? And
Yes.
I always say to
Yeah.
people, like, this, it's not just that simple choice, like you say, like I'm a physicist, like,
Right,
and
right,
so the glass is both half full of air and half full of water,
right,
like, so
right,
that
right, right,
the
right,
glass is
right,
full. So I'm gonna try and kind of move on a little bit. So in 2018, so I hosted the Jalk Call conference at
right,
Mejo in Nagoya, and where you
right,
presented with Glenn Norris
right, right,
and
yeah.
Stephen Henry. So also the web design handbook edit that year. And so that was 2018, and then I think the next time we had it was 2 years ago. Uh,
Right.
I've seen you at many conferences. I think a lot of people have seen you present. And so you've also been to Eurocall a couple of times. So in
Yeah, yeah, I
2023 you
went to
went to
Eurocall this year. I
Iceland.
love that
Was
conference.
was that
I love the Eurocall conference.
Javaskula? Is that the you pronounce it?
Yeah, I think so.
So what did you present there at Eurocall? Could you remember?
Yeah, yeah. So I presented with Mark. I already mentioned what I'm doing with Jeanette, but the other thing I'm doing with Mark,
Yeah.
and I think this is where things are moving. Um, Obviously, I would say that when I'm talking about my
So
own
this is the
research.
the uh, the ex- the
I
extensive reading project, right?
Yes, yes. So one of I think the important things or the big trend in learning with AI is the idea of being a co-creator of the tools that you are then yourself learning to improve. So in other words, what we're doing is we're doing one of the big problems with extensive reading, of course, is getting the materials which are suitable in different languages. We're not just talking about English here. And it's a project that myself and Mark Briley are working on where students chat with an AI bot
Hmm.
which works with them to make an outline of a story. And then based on their level, the the bot creates like a 15 chapter book, which then they read, and then
Oh,
it measures the speed of their reading. And of course, I mean, different people, there's different types of reading for learning a second language. But one of the other things it can actually with the speech generation, it can read to you. So, in other words, the whole book is an audio book and
mm,
something you can read. So, that's something, this kind of co-creation is kind of interesting to me because it means that the student is invested in, they co-created a
the
book,
creation,
they can
right?
share the book with other users,
Mm,
and then they can get 4 chapters and say, oh, this is not very good, I'm going to try again. So and I think this kind of investment in in autonomy of learning, I think this is going to be the key thing with AI because if we're just relying on AI to do it all for you, then of course you're not going to learn. But
mm,
if you're using AI as a kind of second brain, um, then the student will become more kind of they will have more integration or whatever with the machine or
right,
you
right,
know
right. So I think
yeah.
I used or I have been using Notebook LM.
Oh
I,
gosh, that thing is I am. I'm completely in awe of that. That I'm addicted to using it.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I'm addicted to it.
even
Yeah,
now, like even today when I was in class and in the Google Classroom, there popped up a banner saying, like, do you want to integrate Notebook LM into your Google Classroom? And I was thinking like,
yeah,
oh, hang on a second, like, because I know how deep down like the rabbit hole you could get with, like with
yeah,
all of it. So yes, I've used it for creating simple books for my youngest daughter. She loves a bedtime
yeah,
story.
yeah,
And so you actually kind of like find that you're putting in the prompt and like you're working it, and then you see your product, and then you rework it, and then you kind of like do a bit more. So yeah,
yeah,
I think like I've experienced like that kind of like that joy and that interest of like, well, I'll tweak it just a wee bit more, or I'll
yeah,
change
yeah.
this, or I'll
I,
add it, or
I've
I'll
I've
update it.
started, yeah, I've started recording my classes.
Mm.
I get the recording and then I just shove it into Notebook LM and say make a summary of my class,
Oh,
and
excellent.
it basically, and then you do that kind of. If any users are not familiar with Notebook LM, it's basically a system where you can pull in notes, YouTube videos, audio, and then it basically, one of the tools is it kind of creates a podcast, two people
Yeah, the
talking to each
podcast. Yeah,
other.
the two people speaking. That's quite
There's the first time I heard
revelatory.
that was a bit like the first time it was the first time since no ChatGPT first came out that I was like, this is a wow moment because these two are, and I now it's been extended that you can choose critique or two people take opposing sides.
Oh,
So yeah, so it's been improved, and I get my students to use it as well. So one of the things I get them to do is put up notes about some of the things that they've done with me in class, and then they create a small podcast, 3 minutes or something, which they listen to, and
hmm.
they can create the Japanese version if they wish. So
Right, right.
it's um and yeah, this is kind of scarily good. I mean, in the sense that what's going to happen with education when these AIs can do so much that you can't. So
Yeah, it's very natural. It's very natural.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
last week or last month, I interviewed Gordon Wilson down in Zurich,
Right,
and Gordon did a great. He's using the Sesame AI, Miles and Maya,
right,
and the conversations you have with them, like are quite high level. I mean, he recommended, like at level what like B2,
right.
like is the kind of like the level where it's it's really spot on, but. Yeah, really in-depth stuff, like very accurate, like very correct, like and like there's not things wasted on probably humans would do maybe, oh, I've repeated myself or whatever, like it
Right,
knows what
yeah,
it's done.
that is where these things excel is in this kind of synthesis of information. So I'm doing a particular project. It's not relevant what I'm doing, but I've uploaded something like 150 documents. I've linked to 30 YouTube videos. I've uploaded sound, and then I'm like, gosh, I can't even remember some of the stuff. And it creates this synthesis of 5 minutes of two people talking or notes which reference, and you're like, oh yeah, I'd forgotten that bit.
Mm.
So this kind of um, way of synthesizing. But if you're just you've got to use it in a way that is, I mean, the big word that I try to I use nowadays is productive struggle. Without productive struggle, you may as well not be learning. Um, because if you're just using the AI to do, and I'm sure everyone's aware of this. It's not a very deep thought, but if you're just using the AI to do your homework, it's basically a waste of time, isn't it?
Mm.
And that's where we're struggling. Is that, well, we know that AI can do this, but how are we going to? Because none of us really know what we're doing as far as AI is concerned. Um, we had what is it? We had 1,000 years to get pencil and paper right, and we've had 3 years.
That actually,
to do-
that's something that I talk about with students when we do mention technology. Like even just things like, how old is your phone? Oh, my phone is like 3 years old. You say like,
Right.
right, yeah. So how long have we had smartphones for? I had smartphones for about 15 years or something like
Yeah,
that. And say
yeah,
like,
yeah.
so actually the technology these days is actually quite short-lived. Like, and say
Yeah,
to them like,
yeah, yeah.
how long have we had pencils? Like, and they're just
Yeah.
like, oh, about 2,000
Yeah,
years, and you're thinking
yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
I mean, like even
Yeah.
even like the using AI stuff like on the fly. I was teaching Reading Explorer, I think it was, in my my third year reading class,
Right,
and I think the first unit was the Mayan civilization,
right,
part 1A. Part 1B was the Khmer, Angkor Wat and Angkor Chef.
right, right,
Uh,
right,
and so I kind of thought, right, we want to talk about civilizations or empires, how the empires grow and then have a good,
right, right.
like have a time and then they die. And I thought, I'll just quickly on the fly, just like say, asking, what was the difference between the Mayan Empire, the Roman Empire, and the Khmer Empire? And it gave me all this great information, like right there. So, like, like as a teacher, like it was like just like, hang on, I've got an expert just to the side here. I'm going to ask a question, and then boom, I had all this great stuff. And then it was suddenly you realize that you could, I could. I had the students kind of like almost like leaning forward because they were going like, "Oh wow, you can do that," and I'm saying like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
you're not just using
yeah,
it as machine translation. You can ask it, you
yeah.
can
I
question
think
it, whatever."
this is the fundamental thing is that students, young people, I suppose, have grown up with these kind of technologies, and to them, this AI doesn't seem too surprising. It's not like, you know,
No, wow.
what AI is when we think of when pocket calculators came out, that was something. Now it's like, yeah, it's kind of expected, but they don't quite see it because we kind of grew up in a way that we kind of had to struggle through new technologies as they came out.
And they are net
But
natives.
for so many, um, you know, young people today, is that they basically they are, what is it, digital natives. But
Mm.
that's strange because, in a sense, it's a bit like being a native speaker versus someone who's actually learnt the language. The native speaker is just like, well, I can just speak it.
Mm.
There's no effort involved. And they don't necessarily, they haven't gone through what that word again,
Yeah,
productive struggle
the
with
struggle,
it.
the
So
technicalities. Yeah.
once you've gone through that, then you can kind of say, look, this is what it can do. And it's really the autonomy of individual students at the moment because there's so much stuff out there, every day you discover something new that is something that will need to be part of a curriculum of is
Right,
how
right.
to,
So
and we're just not ready for it.
yeah, so like what you were saying, like the productive struggle. So I think like definitely there's a very strong case for that. That like if you struggle and fight with it, like you absorb it a lot more, and if it's just coming dead easy, like that you're not really kind of like getting deep into it. And going back to something you said before about like the word tree, like or sort of
You're
so
right.
in one of my
Decision tree or something.
yeah, the
Yeah,
decision
yeah,
tree. So like,
yeah.
so I try to get my students to do some critical thinking, and so a lot of the
Right,
time, like they're just thinking like, question one, follow up question, the end. And so
right,
we
right,
actually, like we take a discussion topic and say, right, okay, so at the top level, and I write at the top of the board, just in the marker pen, like, and say, right, what questions could you ask? And then from that question, how can you get down? And then how could you get down? And then how could you get
right,
down? And you're like,
right,
where are
right,
we going? And trying to get the students to say, like, how many levels deep into
right.
something can you get? Like how much can you really struggle with it, and like have a bit of grit and tenacity to like to stick with it, and like why like, it doesn't have to be a why because that's the easy way.
Right, right.
But yeah, so I think once I've scaffolded that for students, like one time say like, right, Now, when you move to the next topic, let's try and emulate that same kind of strategy. Like
Right,
so.
right.
It's it proves successful, like to some extent, but I think like maybe if I'd stuck at it, like the students would maybe do more, but then sometimes you're thinking you have to keep things light and keep them moving to keep the motivation high.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, I mean, there's a lot to do with the fact that when possibly you or I use AI and we use it for to find something out, it's that kind of, oh, I want to find out about this. So you end up in a conversation with like an expert in your pocket. And so there's a natural like progression of that conversation because, we're older than the students are. Those things come naturally to us. Whereas you're trying to do this in a second language. When I try to have conversations with ChatGPT in Japanese, I'm like, oh, great, this is going to help my Japanese. But actually, I end up really struggling because,
Demotivated.
yeah, I just like, oh, yeah, this is just too difficult for me. And I end up I'm not too bad if I'm typing, but if I'm trying to talk to it, I'm like, this guy's too smart. I just
Mm.
can't. I feel like overwhelmed by how good. But of course, that I think that is one of the things that's going to happen is that different levels of bots will be generated, and we're going to be out of a job, not because not because AI bots are going to replace instructors, but everybody is going to give their child whatever the Disney character bot that speaks English. And boom, after 10 years of playing with that, they'll be fluent in English because it's kind of a toy for them. So,
Yeah,
you know, the,
American
the,
English, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, we need a Shrek, basically. We need the Shrek one. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like if you're, back to kind of like references of the tech, the technology. So back like Blade Runner, which was supposed to be set in 2049,
yeah,
so the Tyrell Corporation said, like
right.
more
Yes,
human
yes.
than human is our motto.
Right, right.
Like
Yeah.
so. I mean, how long ago did they make Blade Runner? Like and yeah, more human than human is our motto. I think like that because it's in that movie, it means that some AI companies can't use it, but I bet you there's like lots of people that have very similar mottos, like probably now with their uh, with their
Yeah,
AI
I mean,
trying to.
I mean, it's obviously this was bound to happen, but the thing that's been reported on a lot is that for certain, they started giving bots to people who are struggling mentally or or are lonely or elderly people,
Mm,
and people make connections with this with it, and I think we've all experienced this. I when I'm programming and I actually give my I give ChatGPT a name. It's literally the first thing I type in. I say you're called Ada after Ada Lovelace, the first programmers, apparently. And I end up saying please and thank you, and I'm like, oh, I've been asking you too many questions. You're just too helpful. It's like this incredibly helpful item that shaves hours and hours off your work. It always has the right answer. Not always has the right answer, but it's a way that just is helpful and it's infinitely patient. Well, obviously there is going to be a massive problem with how people are going to end up interacting with these bots, which are, you know, more patient than humans are, but
Yeah, so
they
years ago, I bought one of the first Amazon Alexa devices, and I
right,
installed
right,
it in my
right.
mother's house in Scotland, so that
Right,
I could just call her, and I was sat there in front of her chair, so I could do a video call with her. She didn't have to worry about picking up the phone or charging the wireless
right,
handset and stuff like that. It was
right,
literally it was
right,
plugged
right,
in. I called her, like Alexa, please drop in on Brian. It was on my own account. And then, like, so she knew and she could see me there. And, like, I had a camera version here. And that was great. And then when we weren't actually speaking to each other, like she could still have that interaction.
Right.
And at that time, like, she would often, be quite terse with the machine. Like, oh, shut up. Like, and
Yeah.
other people say, like, oh no,
Yeah.
don't speak to the machine like that, because like they're going to remember, and in the future, like they're gonna.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
gotta say,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like, well,
I think we've all had that impatient moment,
right,
you
right, right.
know.
And I think, like,
Yeah.
when you are, I guess sometimes when you're speaking with like, for example, the Amazon one, like it'll give you a response of, like, like, I'm sorry, I don't know that, or
Right.
like,
Right.
and you kind of thinking, like, oh well, good, I'm still cleverer than the machine.
Right.
But
Right.
then you use another kind of like AI now, and you're thinking, like, oh Lord, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it knows
Yeah.
it knows everything. It's, it really is more intelligent than quite a lot of us mere mortals.
Yeah, yeah. I mean I do obviously I do a lot of programming, and I used to just use ChatGPT, where I would just paste things in to
Mhm.
ChatGPT, and I often got things wrong or didn't quite. But there's a new one called Claude,
Yep.
where it actually kind of the programming Claude basically reads all your code, and I feel like I'm a lead developer because it does a lot of the stuff that I hate doing.
The
I
boring
can't
stuff.
remember exactly how to do this algorithm, but I still have to tell it what to do. And it just makes me work like things that would take 2 or 3 days. There are sometimes things that would take me 2 or 3 days that I can literally do in 5 minutes.
Right. I
Um,
mean, that's really what we got computers for, right? To speed up so that we can concentrate on, like,
yeah,
the good stuff. Well,
yeah,
listen, we're gonna have to crack on. So,
right,
so you mentioned before, so you're doing the speech recognition as a medical tool with Jeanette Dennis, and that's one of your current Kaken projects.
right, right,
You also had so the extensive reading project with Mark Brierley at Shinshu University.
right,
How
right.
many Kakens have you done uh, today?
I've done, I think I've done three, and I've done another. I'm actually finishing up with my third one, and I'm a co with two others, Mark and Jeanette, and I had to apply for because I'm doing these ones are finishing another two next year, but I haven't don't know if I'm going to get those ones yet. I've applied for another two,
Right.
so.
So for listeners, would you recommend like running like three concurrently?
Yeah, yeah, it's like be careful what you wish for sometimes. But I think one of there was at Euro Call, there was a very interesting thing. I can't remember his first name, but Plonsky was the keynote speaker, and one of the things he said was, see if I can remember it. Basically, he said within second language acquisition and call, there was little evidence of high quality research. And what was it? He said that it was like there was abundant evidence of low quality research. Um,
Mm.
and this was not put as a real criticism. It was just the reality of how if we compare with medicine, for example, you can't really have an A group. You can't like have a control group versus a non-control group you know, within education because, obviously there are all sorts of things, ethical problems with doing. And then of course, there's so many confounding variables within education. But I think something that's going to change is that one of the great things with AI is the ability to capture information that the students are, produce, like especially in language learning. I mean,
Mm.
you could never capture what a student said. I mean, you could capture it, you could record them, but if you're doing kind of, you've got 100 students, how would you would record them all and transcribe it? But now, of course, with AI, there's going to be kind of and I think this is where the research will lead with this will help to improve education in the fact that it's going to be much easier to capture. Obviously, there are ethical constraints, but I think this is something that's going to change a lot with AI is how we improve education because we'll have much better data than we've had up to now, I think.
Yeah, there's maybe quite a lot coming quite quickly. So
Yes, yeah. We're just not ready for it,
we
basically.
need time to digest. Speaking of which, that's us at the end of part two. Join us after the break for part three.
Are you stuck at work in February and just looking for a way to get out of the office? Maybe you're looking for a fun travel destination during your time off. Well, look no further than the Sutliff 2026 conference. That's the Sojo University Teaching and Learning Forum down in Kumamoto City, February 12th, 13th, and 14th. This 3-day event has its main sessions on Friday, with fun events Thursday and Saturday to justify that 4, maybe even 5-day expense trip away from the office. This is our special 10th anniversary, and to celebrate, we're bringing in keynote panelists from across Southern Kyushu. Thursday night's event is BYOP. That's Bring Your Own Poster. We'll have some drinks, appetizers, and then everyone's encouraged, though not required, to bring in an A4 or A3 poster to spark some conversations. This is different from the vetted poster session we'll have on Friday, though if you want to bring that same poster in on Thursday night, that's fine too. After the main conference on Friday, Sojo will shuttle us down to our networking dinner. It's always full of great food and great conversations. Saturday morning, we'll have a castle tour. Kumamoto Castle is one of the big 3 castles of Japan. So if you haven't seen it yet, now's your chance. The call for proposals is open now. The link is in the description, or just search for us. That's Sutliff, SUTLF 2026, and should be the first thing that pops up. All right, that's all from me. We'll see you in February.
Hi, welcome back, everybody, to section 3 at the Jack Call podcast. This is Brian Gallagher interviewing Gary Ross. Gary, in the first part, we were talking about your background and your dealings with all of the platforms that you made. One of them, of course, is Edzilla, which we are going to be using for the Jalk Call 2026. Thank you very much for having such a wonderful platform and for letting us use it. Everybody at Jalk Call really appreciates your platform. I know we did use some other platforms for some time, but I think everybody's quite happy to come back and to keep using your platform is a thing of beauty. Is a thing of beauty. And I think like we're quite happy that like we're back where we should be. I'm personally very happy that that we use a platform that was developed by one of our one of our members, you. And the fact that it works so nicely compared to the other platforms that are out there. So on behalf of Jalt Call and the Jalt family, I'd like to say thank you.
I appreciate it, Brian.
It's
Yeah.
it's a great thing.
Made in a panic in 2020 when we were rushing, and it is due for some updates, which I will be doing with my friend Claude Code.
Right. Okay. Well, don't update it right now because I'm
No, don't
building.
worry, don't worry,
I'm
don't worry.
the it's of course under construction now, but we will
Yeah.
very shortly. So the conference for 2026, Alcohol Conference 26, the location has been decided and confirmed. The dates have been decided and confirmed. Our 2 conference chairs have been decided and confirmed.
Excellent.
And I can't say right now what that is because that information will be released with some fanfare, I guess, by our publicity officer. But it looks like we're going to smash it out of the park again.
Great,
There's
great. I
going to be
look
there's going to be
forward to
some
it.
there's
It's
going to be
always such
some
a good conference.
yeah, there's going to be like some kind of like additionals this year as well. So the location that we've got gives us a chance to do that. So that's something to look forward to in June of
June.
2026, right? So we are returning to our classic position in the ELT calendar of June 26th, which is something that I want to not nail down. If I had a welding gun, I would get it stuck there so it never moves. But yeah, that's going to be
Yeah,
in
yeah,
June.
that
The
would be
exact
nice.
dates will release soon. Will release soon. In fact, maybe by the time
I
this
can't
pod comes
wait.
out, it might be out there. Speaking of recent things, so October 2025, which was this month,
Yes.
I have been reading an article by the very famous Gary Ross and Mark Brierley entitled Language Teaching in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, which has
Ooh,
come out with the Mind, Brain and Education SIG, which you put out. Yeah. So well done on that little article. The reason I know the Mind, Brain and Education, the Mind, Brain SIG is because Pi SIG, of which I'm also a member, we put out a number of articles in it just earlier in the year
right.
and at the back of 2024. So I'll also put that into the show notes as well, so people can see that. So the theme for that uh, the October issue is artificial intelligence, language teaching in the age of
Yeah.
in intelligence. So in there, so it's you and Mark Brierley. So I guess that's linked with the ER project, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so there's mention in there about rules, structures, mathematics, algorithms, textures, collocations, and emergent phenomena.
Yes, yes. That's the big thing with LLMs
Mm.
is emergent behavior because we have no idea how they work. I mean, we know how to make them, but we don't. It's a bit like the best analogy, I guess, would be if you cut out if when you sliced open Einstein's brain, you didn't know how it worked. The same with LLMs. We don't know why they work as well as they do. This kind of emergent behavior. There might be something deep in the structure of the universe or atomic relations that enable very, very sophisticated outputs um, from data, and I think this is whether we've reached like a plateau or whether it's just going to keep on moving up. That is going to be the big question. Yeah.
So one of the things I picked out there was like so I teach one reading course, a third year
Right.
reading course. And so I'm a bit of a disadvantage to the other teachers I teach with because they teach like reading one, reading two, reading three, reading four, and I just teach
Right.
reading five.
Right.
So they know what the kids are doing in first year and second year for the ER program, and
Right.
we
Right.
use M Reader uh,
Right. Yep.
to assess
Yep. That's a
them.
great
I
platform.
heard people,
Yeah.
I know the ER Congress was just recently in Hokkaido.
Yes, yeah, Mark presented. I'd just come back from Europe, so I couldn't make it. I mean, literally, I'd come back from Italy 2 or 3 days before. So,
Oh,
but
poor you, poor you.
Mark presented. He did all the hard work for me. So, yeah, he presented there about NI.
Yeah, so it says ER aligns with Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis, which
Right,
posits language acquisition occurs through exposure to comprehensible input that includes some items slightly beyond one's current level,
right,
thereby allowing learners to intuitively grasp language rules and usage without explicit instruction. So I think
yeah,
like when I make something, so I usually make it for the level. I make it level specific, and
right,
I tell the prompt, like create such and such and such at set for level A2, like
right.
but then I kind of realized that, like if I'm limiting it to level A2, I'm not introducing, like those extra bits of information. And
Right.
so, uh, do you add like an additional to that kind of prompt? Should I?
Yeah, well, I mean, this has actually been the hardest thing is the getting low level text is actually the hardest thing.
Mm,
AI is very good. It's very good at what it's been trained on. There is more to it than that, of course, but one of the things that AI hasn't really been trained on is a lot of text that is designed for low-level readers. So it knows what Cepher A1 is and knows what Cepher A2 is, but it's not that good at producing such text. So essentially the way we do it is we produce the student produces the text, and then they just try to read it and they say this is too easy or too difficult, and basically the text is becomes kind of, in other words, it's not like this is A1,
mm,
this is approximately A1, but through the data of students reading it, we can actually understand how difficult it really is. So, and we can kind of understand because there's lots of data of how fast they're reading. It's all like we know the words on a particular page. We can kind of then, and this will be part of the future use of the system, is that we'll be able to go, okay, this is too difficult for Japanese readers because as we know, there's no such thing as A1, A2 or whatever
mm.
in the sense of what is difficult for one learner might be easier for another learner depending on what country they're from. So
Right,
the
right.
things that Japanese won't struggle necessarily with vocabulary, which there's a katakana word for, French learners won't struggle with vocabulary that comes from the French,
Mm,
but that there's no overlap there. So you can't really say this is a particular level. You can only say this is a particular level for this particular user. And I think there's a philosophy of ER. Mark is the big expert here. I'm just like I'm along for the ride here. Mark is like as long as they're reading a lot,
mm.
that is the main thing because the is the crashing thing, right? The more exposure that you have, the better. It's like let's improve the Japanese education system of English. Well, you could do it in one line. You say, come in, you get all your students in, and just say, watch TikTok for the next 6 years. They'd be end up better than they are now,
Right.
because they basically what is it? They do um, one. This is not a criticism of individual teachers, of course. It's just a criticism of the approach that is not the only way you get good at something that's difficult is doing a lot of it, and we all know that whether you're playing a musical instrument or learning to drive or learning to ski or
Expensive.
learning a second
Right.
language,
Just
you
do it.
will
Yeah.
not get good. And, this is the ER philosophy is like just do as much as you
Just do a
can.
ton of it.
Yeah,
So it's the
yeah.
thing I was thinking about, like with like models and all that kind of stuff. So of course, a lot of people do stuff in alignment with Cepher, uh,
Right,
and Cepher goals. Um,
right,
and I guess like Charlie Brown, Brent Culligan, Joseph Phillips made their general service list, the
right,
NGSL, which of course is updated
right. And
in
GSL. Yeah,
23.
yeah. It's great,
Um, and
great work.
yeah, it's good. So, what kind of data do you think, like us as like EFL, ESL teachers, if we are putting them into models and looking for output, what kind of data like should we be putting in for creating content for?
Oh, you mean actually training models?
Yeah, so I mean, like
Oh,
I probably like one of my colleagues, he's very much all about the NGSL, like use that.
right, right,
And I do a lot of things like with kind of like with Zephyr too. I just wondered
right.
like what other like what's the word lexical.
Lexical data.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, and it's pretty difficult to answer. I think one of the things that a lot of people have discovered, unless you really know what you're doing in terms of training a model, is often it's just a case of how much data is available.
Mm,
So you might go, okay, I've got access to, 1,000 writings for my students. You're like, oh, open AI hasn't been trained on that, so you put 1,000 in, but then you're told actually 1,000 is not really, you need 100 million. Now that's a a scale that we don't have access to. But if what AI, often open AI has that data within it. So it's more of a case, I think, of us trying to learn how we can get the data out through prompting and better prompting as opposed to trying to train it ourselves. I think there's this idea of we can train open AI by using RAGs or whatever. That you do need a lot of data. But there
mm.
are I think one of the great this is a site that people might want to take a look at. Not it seems quite technical if you look, but there's a site called Hugging Face. Are you
Yeah,
aware
yeah,
of
yeah,
this
yeah,
site?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Hugging Face.
yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that in our studio talk last 2 weeks
Yeah,
ago.
so Hugging Face, of course, is the kind of the repository of shared data.
Right.
And I think this kind of um, data that we're looking for very specific purposes is 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 going to be kind of Hugging Face is where you're going to get that data, and we're going to have to learn how to actually train
Mm,
bots and anything that's kind of open is preferable. But one of the big issues with AI is the expense of running it. It's just
right.
not something that is ever going to, well, I
Yeah,
can't say
yeah. So
it's expensive to run.
yeah, it so at my uni, I'm part of a carbon neutral group. Um
Right.
And
Yeah.
so we have like kind of like a monthly or bi-monthly meeting. And so there's a lot of very clever guys, like doing stuff with, like biochemistry, like in materials and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. I'm just in the faculty of foreign languages, so I'm more interested in kind of like in policy, like things like that,
Right.
because like the rollout and getting the message out there. But of course, like there's a lot of energy going to be required, like, and with more and more people demanding to use the AI and getting exposure to it and using it more extensively.
Yeah, and I think the big problem is, I mean, to put a comparison is that when I first started um doing websites back in 1999 or something. And I told you that I made my Japanese website, and it got like, 40, 50,000 visitors a day back. Not quite as many today, but because it was the only one of its time.
Mm,
But I could just pay 20, 30, $40 a month
mm,
to to serve that many users. But I've installed a local AI into a machine that I access at home. But
mm,
I can only serve one person, that's me. If 40,000 people, I can host my own AI, an
mm,
open source AI, but I wouldn't be able to support, only one person can use it. So if a university is like going, oh, a university can run Moodle and go, we want an open source system. And they're like, oh, we'll go to Hugging Face, we'll download the latest thing. Well, it's just not the infrastructure and the power that you need to supply to two, three, four, five, 10,000 users is
mm,
just prohibitive. And we have to think of this issue because I mean, I think you gave the example earlier on that with Google Classroom, Notebook LM is
Yep.
pulled into it automatically. Well, if only your Googles of the world, your Nvidias of the world, of course they're going to be branching out, um, and are the only companies that can actually afford to run this, then you don't have any choice of so there's going to be a great ethical dilemma here. How much are we going, because we already know how, if we think of, we're worried about our data being used now when it's just Google and what we search for. Can you imagine the kind of data that they'll have on you if you tell your darkest secrets to some bot, So, and you're getting your students are using that, and then of course your students are going to be chatting away to the bot, and that conversation could just kind of go to one side to something private or something, and then suddenly Google has that, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're not going to use that information," but we know, and information is key to um, these companies won't be giving this away for free. This is why
Mm.
none of these systems are. You get you know, OpenAI can't make the high level stuff free, so there's going to be a great ethical dilemma here, which I'm not quite sure how we're going to solve, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I mean, I said, yeah,
Yeah.
we need like a whole nother lifetime to work that all out. Right, so just we're coming to close to the end today. Do you have some hints and tips or some something you'd maybe kind of like want to share with the listeners, like something that's they should maybe try out, maybe a web page or
Well, I think the most important thing is with AI is you just have to try to build something yourself. So if you're like, okay, we talked about Notebook LM,
Mm,
and you just got to try to, for example, okay, I'm asking my students to try to learn English from using it. I think the same thing is you got to find people have to find things that they're not very good at and
mm,
see if they can actually use their approaches with AI to improve that. So, I do much of the same. I've learned a lot because I've chosen a topic that I'm not very good at. There's many of them. Um, but by trying to go, okay, what are some of the ways that I can use AI to enhance my knowledge? I think one of the things I've been using a lot of recently is a note-taking app called Obsidian, which I love. Um, and Obsidian is just text-based. Learn how to write stuff in text markdown, and it's a great thing that you can do is for example, you can have a discussion with no with um, chat any chatbot of your choice, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you use, and
mm,
you just at the end of it say, okay, can you summarize the whole chat in Markdown? You download it, you put it into Notebook LM, which then of course can make the audio. So this kind of round tripping, I guess you call it, where
mm.
you're using one tool to pass information to another tool, and then you could, for example, Notebook LM
Filter and condensing. Mm,
will make flashcards, so
mm.
you can have a discussion about a particular topic in
And a
in
quiz,
in
yeah.
ChatGPT,
Mm,
and I think try finding ways in which you can try to tie these things together because there are some kind of technical challenges when you so I just gave the example of I chat with ChatGPT and then about some programming problem I'm having or not understanding. And then I'll say, okay, put this into Markdown. And then I will export the Markdown. I'll pull it into Notebook LM. And then I'll say, okay, make a podcast about my conversation and make a quiz about it. So I'm using one AI tool
mm,
to pull into another AI tool. And I think the best way to do is to find something you can't do. I mean, and try to learn something new. It could be, I mean, if you're interested in existential philosophy or something, you're like, I have no idea about it. I'm going to see if I can learn about it. And you end up, I think that is the bet. I think that's an important approach because then we can kind of better understand some of our student struggles because a lot of people say to me, "Oh, I didn't know about Notebook LM," and then you show it to them, and they're like, "I still don't know about it. I still don't understand what
I
it does."
overload. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
overload.
So this kind of giving every if you hear about a new technology, I think this happened with Chat GPT when it first came out.
Mm.
I remember saying to people, "Ah, it's amazing. You can put all," and they're just like, "Yeah, but I don't need to chat. I chat with people. Like, yeah, that's chat is actually one of the minor things it does in a way. It's not really a chatty thing, is it? It does so much more. So you discover that through using something because this idea of discoverability, and I think this is something we need to understand why our students are struggling with this
Mm.
because if I send my students to Notebook LM and say try and use it, they'll look at it for 10 minutes and go, I don't understand what this is. I don't understand how it's useful. So
Mm.
I think we ourselves as instructors or whatever need to be able to use
Yeah,
these
guide
and
from the
tie them
sides.
together.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
Obsidian. I've heard other people saying that they had moved from other note-taking systems, to Obsidian. So Obsidian
yeah.
claims that they store the notes privately on your device, so you can access them quickly, even offline, and they don't read that data.
Yeah, yeah. The nice thing about one of the big, I spent years trying to find the correct note-taking app,
Mm,
and basically I had some requirements. It had to be open source.
mm,
It had to be such that it didn't use some kind of proprietary way of storing data
mhm,
because we all know that if a company goes out of business or says, "Oh, you're trying to leave our service, but you can't export it."
mm.
So Obsidian is just text, it's markdown
Right,
basically,
and it's
which is the
encrypted.
most fun. Yeah, everybody should know markdown. You got to learn markdown.
Love it.
If it feels like, oh, that's like program, it's straightforward. It's just like typing in an email. Um, and it's got lots of plugins. And the thing that I also like about it is that if you're an iPhone user, you can just put it in iCloud. You don't even have to pay for sync. So it's totally free. If you are an Android user, you can use the syncing systems within Android and it will still work, or you can pay them to store. So I find it's a great place where I dump stuff all the time into it.
Mm.
I've got into this habit of at the end of a long conversation with ChatGPT or anything, I just go, okay, summarize the whole thing in Markdown that I can download it, throw it into Obsidian and throw it into Notebook LM. And, you know, there you've got your a summary of all the things that and then I never look at it again. Yeah, we all
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
I was reading the other day, I think it was Thomas Young, a polymath from the 18th century. Um, and it was said about him that he'd read every book that had ever been published. But the interesting thing is really that people could imagine that there was a time when, of course, he hadn't, but
Mm,
people could imagine at the turn of the 18th century that there might have been a person who'd read every book that ever been
mm,
read.
mm.
But if someone said,
No, no.
now you couldn't even read, there's no every
You need reading
hour it's
titles. Yeah,
produced a
yeah,
lifetime
yeah.
of
Take
information.
note of
So
this.
we're just getting so much information that we have we have to find a way to consolidate it. And
Yes,
I think
consolidation. Yeah, condensing and
this is
consolidating.
where technology
Right.
can really
Sure, for sure.
help.
Right. So we're gonna have to wrap up. Just quickly. So we're gonna have the Jalk Golf Forum at Jalk Golf International coming up in November. Uh,
Right.
are you going to be going to Jalk International conference, or have you got some other conferences that you've got before now and the end of the year?
Um, I can't make Jaunt National this year. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to any conferences between
You've
now
done
and
a
the end
lot,
of the
right, this
year.
year already.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Eurocall
I've
and
been running around conferences. Um, yeah, I go to the
you need to stay home and get
Eurocall.
some laundry done.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I want to get my Japanese website updated.
Right, yeah,
That's a
yeah,
core.
kibosh
That's
on
a
the
core one.
on the passport on the passport. So
Yeah.
I was going to mention
Yeah.
to you with the passport. So my grandparents are from Derry. Uh,
Oh, okay.
so my mother passed away, like just a few years ago, and so of course my brother investigated, like kind of the lineage and things like that. And we went to Ireland when we were younger.
Right.
I mean, I was so young, I don't really have much memory of it. But so I found out that I'm entitled to an Irish passport.
Oh, wow. You can get
But
your
of course,
EU passport.
you have an Irish passport, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah. That's of course I don't sound Irish at all because I left Ireland when I was very young, but I did go to school. My grandfather owned a school in Ireland. Um, and really our family basically left when my grandfather passed away, and then we sold the school. I think that was in the 80s. And there was a lot of land just south of Dublin, which is worth more than probably 50 times as much as I've earned in my
Oh,
lifetime.
I can imagine.
So,
So
yeah, who knew with the Irish economy? Yeah. So I
just
just
south
went
of
there
Dublin.
recently, the first time for a number of years, and it's not the place I recognized as a child,
Right, right.
but it's, Ireland's such a great place. People are
Yes.
so
Yes.
friendly.
So of course,
Um,
Eurocall is going to be there next year. They're going to be in Belfast,
that's right. It's
right?
in the north. It's in
Then
Belfast, I
to be
believe,
sure, to
next
be
year.
sure,
So
in the north.
and it's in, I think it's in September next year, which means that the flights are going to be a bit cheaper.
Right
So
after the summer holidays.
normally it's in August, but next year they've kind of made, and there's always a good Japanese contingent there. And it's always a great conference because I
Mm.
think sometimes here in Japan, when we go to conferences, we tend to bump into the same
All
people that we
all your
always know.
acquaintances,
So
yeah,
it's always
yeah,
very nice when
yeah.
you go to Eurocall. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
right. Okay, so we're going to end it there just with a little bit of prose. So, may the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, Gary Ross, Slanja, thank you for joining. Hey,
thank
thank
you
you.
so
Thanks,
much. That
Gary.
was really interesting.
Thanks a lot. Bye. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time on the Jalk Call podcast.